much for coming on to the podcast.
Glad to be here.
Fantastic. Okay, so how does one know if they are in a toxic work environment?
Yeah. Well, a toxic work environment is one where you're feeling mistreated. Very often a toxic work environment allows people to misbehave, some of your colleagues or maybe your boss. So if you have a bullying boss or coworkers who are allowed to sort of bully or um, push you, disparage you, or whatever. And there's no culture in that organization to kind of prevent that mistreatment of employees. Then it's a pretty good sign that's a toxic environment. And no one should have to deal with a toxic environment. And there are other opportunities out there. So, my advice is if you're in that kind of situation, you want to look to get out.
Yeah. So, what would you say is the big difference between being challenged versus being bullied? Because that can be a fine line, right?
Yeah, of course. I think when someone challenges you, so your supervisor, your leader, I'm a leadership scholar, so we always talk
Yeah.
about leadership.
Mm.
And leaders, when they challenge, they should do it in a sort of supportive way, you know? So when I think about uh what leaders do, they delegate. They delegate responsibilities. They empower them and give them responsibilities. But it's really critical for the leader to not overtax the individual, to not push them so far that they're completely stressed. And that's really important for the leader and the follower, the leader and the employee to develop a good relationship so they understand one another. So a good leader should challenge you, but in a kind of a supportive way. They shouldn't berate you, punish you when you don't achieve goals. A- a- All the research in psychology says that positive reinforcement's much better than punishing people. You're going to motivate people if you encourage them. You're going to kill motivation by punishing people.
Got it. So, most of the time, I guess this is going to be specialized based on the person that you're working with, right? Because some people, they might need more of a challenge because sometimes if you give them too much positive reinforcement, they might get lazier, right? So, as a leader, how do you know when to push someone and when not to push someone?
Yeah. Well, the thing about motivation, and you mentioned, the sort of laziness, and one of the issues there is the person really lazy, or are they, they're unable to do their job, or there's something else going on. And again, it gets back to the supervisor, to the leader. They need to be in touch with the employee. They need to know kind of what's going on in their lives. They do have to develop a good relationship. So all the kind of concepts of leadership, theories of leadership that talk about what really is exemplary leadership um, emphasize quality relationships. So you should have a good relationship with your supervisor, and that supervisor should
Mm.
know how to motivate you. Um, sure, there's going to be employees who are, trying to just get by, go under the radar screen, just get a paycheck or whatever. But then that's the leader's responsibility to say, hey, you're not a good fit for our organization. You need to
Mm.
be looking elsewhere. So I really do put this on the supervisor, to develop and to nurture employees, to motivate them, to understand when you're going to overload somebody because you don't want to overload people.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, now would you mind if you quickly go through like the different types of harassment and, like bullying and abuse that people should look for in a work environment? Because I know in your article you mentioned like sexual abuse, verbal, and so on and so forth. So yeah, well, if you can just go through a few of those types, that would be great.
Yeah. Well, anything that makes you, feel uncomfortable. So obviously, sexual harassment, that's completely out of bounds. That's a good reason to go to HR to really consider leaving a job, finding a better environment. Sometimes an overt bullying where somebody gets in your face and is constantly ragging on you,
Mhm.
that's the kind of situation that you definitely got to get out of. But I think you also need to look for the more subtle kinds of bullying that occurs, or people leaving you out of work related conversations, purposely doing that and doing that consistently, marginalizing you, that kind of thing. Now, obviously, on the other side, some employees do isolate themselves, but again, it comes back to the leaders in the organization to try to draw those people out.
Got it. Okay, so I guess it just comes down to basically, stuff that makes you feel like it's a bit too much. When you start feeling pretty uncomfortable, that's when you know there's a line, right? And oftentimes it's going to come in the form of sexual, verbal, and being excluded
Yeah.
by people in your work environment.
Yeah. Yeah, just general mistreatment. One of the things, if you think about stress, we always think of stress as being sort of negative. And there is a positive aspect to stress. Think of it as challenge, I've got this deadline, I've got this big project, but I'm motivated to do this. And I know I've got to work overtime. I know I'm going to be stressed, challenged. When the stress becomes a kind of a negative thing, when it's interpersonal, these people are making my life miserable, that's the time where you say, hey, this is a really bad environment to be in.
Got it. Okay, so if people, do find out that they are in a toxic environment, what are the best ways to approach that situation, just in your experience?
Well, I mean, obviously you don't want it to escalate. So in the best way is early on to try to put a stop to it. It's very difficult to stand up to somebody who's bullying you,
Hmm.
particularly if it's your boss, right? Because they have a lot of power. But you should, if your HR department is supportive, is a good one, then you can turn to HR. But the thing is to not let it escalate, not let it get to a stage where it's so negative that there's no alternative but to leave the organization. So you want to kind of like nip it in the bud, get to it as early as possible. But the other thing is, if you're in that environment and it's really bad and it's continuous, that's the time to look for another job.
Got it. Yeah. So it comes down to HR looking for a new job. And you mentioned stop it early on,
Yeah.
right? So what would be the way to do that? Like, do you just go and talk to the person, or like, how would you help a person, stop it early on?
Yeah, I think you have to be tactful. So if it's a coworker, approach them, and it takes courage, right? And say, look, what's going on, and try to reason with them. If they refuse to interact with you, or they continue that, then you go to the supervisor, or you go to HR. If the supervisor doesn't provide support, that's a real good warning sign that things aren't going to get better.
Hmm.
um, because it's your supervisor's job to care for you, to make sure that you are able to do the work that you're there to do, to facilitate your work. And so if someone is harassing you and you can't do your job, then the leader needs to be just as concerned as you are about that.
Got it. Okay. So I guess, you mentioned, speak with a supportive, like coworker of yours, or try and speak to that supervisor itself. And if it's not going anywhere, then you have to go to HR and kind of go from there, and
Yeah,
even leave the job if need be.
you got to take some action. I mean, if you
Yeah. Yeah.
the problem is people, it's hard to do it. It takes courage, as I said, to confront somebody, but you have to do it for your own good. The downside would be, you endure it. You go home, you complain to your significant other, or your friends. That's not going to solve the problem. That
Yeah.
is, you're going to go back into that toxic environment.
Got it. Okay. That is great. And then the other sign that you mentioned was, being in a dead end job, right? So what do you mean by that? What is a dead end job?
Well, a dead end job would be a job where there's no chance for you to move up. There's no way to enhance your career. So I think people need to think about the work that they do in kind of a long term focus on really, what is my career? What's my trajectory? And some people are fine with staying where they are, going kind of doing the same job over and over again. But many of us want to reach for you know, higher things. We want to advance in our job. We want to get better at doing our job. And so some of the things you want to look for in an organization is support for that. Do they support your growth? Do they have opportunities for promotion? Do they talk about those opportunities for promotion? I remember back when I was a kid and I had a job in a restaurant, and I thought the manager did a really good job. He said, he had a picture of the founder of the restaurant chain, and he said, the founder started out where you are in this
Yeah,
very position, and someday that he moved up, and
it's
and
inspiring.
that kind of idea is a really good strategy. But I think people need to take responsibility for their own career development. And so if you're in a
Hmm.
job and you see there's no possibility to ever get promoted, to ever get ahead, they don't really support you in terms of getting better and learning more about your job. So, like in many white collar jobs, right? Many executive jobs, they'll pay for you to go back to school. My son in law, his company helped pay for him going back and getting an MBA
Oh,
because they wanted
totally.
him to move up in the organization and become
Hmm.
a project manager rather than just sort of a one of the team members.
Yeah.
So those are good signs in organizations. I had a friend that was a manager in a restaurant chain, and it was a family-owned restaurant chain, and he was terrific. He was a really great manager. Could have won awards, and I consulted with him, and I said, everybody who has a higher level position in this organization is a family member. You're a non-family member in a family-run organization. They're never going to move you up. And his his issue, what he was confronted with, was, does he stay in the organization and stay where he is and never get ahead, or does he look for other opportunities? And so my encouragement was, look for other opportunities. You're too good to be stuck in a kind of a dead end job.
Yeah. Yeah. So, like, one of the main problems when it comes down to moving up is that sometimes that company might not have any openings, right?
Right.
So, as an employee, what is a healthy pace for advancement? Like, how often should you be moving up? Like, once every 2 years, just so you know what you're working with.
Yeah. Well, I think there's, that really is something where a person has to reflect on that and sort of set their own goals, because you don't want to move up too fast. Some people are
Yeah.
very, very motivated. They want to fast track. They want to jump up. But here's the issue is, you need, and I tell this, I'm a college professor, right? I tell
Yeah.
this to my students, is always be on the lookout for opportunities, and whenever possible generate opportunities. So when we talk about the value of networking outside of your organization, you want to be doing that because there are lots of possibilities out there in the world, and you don't have to. Too many people think, oh, if I'm talking to somebody else outside the organization, looking at other options for career advancement, other places to work, better positions, that I'm being disloyal. But
Yeah.
you're not being disloyal, because you can always go back to your employer and say, I'm looking at this other opportunity, or I've been offered this other opportunity. What can you do to make to satisfy my concerns, my needs? And you might work something out. But if they are not willing to move on that, then I think the issue is to look at the other opportunity and take it.
Yeah.
So if you're going to advance in your career, it's much easier to advance. I sort of talk about zigzag, right? You go outside the organization, move up a little bit, and then maybe go outside that organization and move up a little bit. So you
Uh-huh.
don't want to stay in a dead end job.
Yeah. So you mentioned that, sometimes you have to like create your own opportunities, right?
Right.
Now, when it comes down to networking, what are the best ways to do that? Obviously, with the internet, that's opened up a lot of different, uh, you know, pathways, right? So, how would you say a person should network if they want to create their own opportunities?
Yeah. Well, I think first you have to have the mindset. You have to say, "What? Okay, why am I doing this? Why am I networking? Why am I out, talking to these people?" It's because I'm trying to generate opportunities, and and then I think too, if you have kind of a learning orientation, so why should I go outside my organization, talk to somebody who's in a competitor or whatever, and learn about what they do? Well, that you're learning more about what are the other opportunities. The other, what's it like to work in your organization? And you
Mhm.
may say, hey, I'm a better fit for that organization than the one I'm currently in. Or how did you move ahead? That kind of thing. So I think always asking people, when you're networking, think about what can you learn from those people, right? What can you learn that can help you in your own career and in your own career advancement and in your own career learning.
Got it. Okay. Great. And then you also mentioned like they have to give you the opportunity to learn, like as a human being and grow as a person, right? So not just necessarily moving up in the company, but learning and just, growing your mind.
Right.
So what is the right pace for that? Because sometimes, you hear that companies pile on so many things and the workers just have too much to do, right?
Yeah.
There's too much learning and it's just not optimal. So what is the right pace that people should be kind of made to learn new skills at an organization?
Well, I mean, I think you should, approach it in the sense that you should always be learning. You should always
Mm,
be moving ahead, and basically, if you think about this from a career standpoint, is you're trying to make yourself as valuable a worker as you possibly can. So increasing the knowledge about the job that you're doing, increasing, um, learning new technologies, learning new procedures, all of these kinds of things, keeping yourself informed because that's going to make you more valuable. And that's how you're going to move up. If you just have one skill set and one knowledge base,
yeah.
you're never going to move up. I had a friend who, worked in kind of engineering, right, in the utility industry, and she taught herself, computer assisted design programs, right, and her company was not using this new technology. And so she went to her boss and said, we should be using this new technology. It's going to increase our productivity. It's going to, lead to better outcomes for us. And her boss said, I don't want to learn this new technology, that kind of thing. And I said, it's time for you to look for another job. You need to go to a
Mm,
place where you've got these skills. Your current employer doesn't value those skills. In fact, they don't even want you to have those skills. That's a sure sign that you need to go find an organization that's going to say, hey, we embrace you. We love that you know how to do this new technology. And how can you work with us so that we can have, mutual positive outcomes, that we can do a better job, with our product, but also how can we use you in a better way to, maybe train the other people in that
mm,
technology. So she was extremely valuable, but she was really in a dead end job.
got it. Okay, so it seems like you're kind of telling people to more like self-educate and not just rely on someone else telling you what to do,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. But you can work that too. You can say to your boss, "Look, I mean, that's what mentoring is all about."
Yeah.
So, seek out a mentor, seek out somebody. It could be somebody in your organization, could be somebody outside your organization, but somebody who's willing to help you in your path to grow and develop as a more valuable employee.
Got it. Okay, now one thing about self-education. So oftentimes people believe like they have to go back to school if they want to grow more, in that department, right?
Yeah.
But what are other ways that people can approach this? Like what would you tell them to do if they wanted to self-educate and what's like the most effective way to do that?
Yeah, well, I don't think there's one strategy you want to,
Mm,
I mean, so one thing is formal education, and
yeah.
particularly if your employer will pay for the formal education, then that makes sense. If you have the resources and you want to get formal education, then you can do that. But again, a mentor can be an educator for you. There's plenty of online resources that you can use, to develop certain kinds of skills, and most of those don't cost anything. Now there are the ones, you have to sort of evaluate the market because they're the
Yeah.
ones they'll charge you. There's some that will overcharge you,
Hmm.
but there are a lot of free resources out there. But also just, put yourself on a plan to develop. It's how we learn new things.
Got it. Okay. That is fantastic. So yeah, that's really important for people to know. Because this is a huge problem, right? Especially in the West, like so many people, they don't like their job at all, right? They are in a work environment that's toxic, as you mentioned. Their job is a dead end. They're not learning, and that leads to the next problem, which is too much comfort, right?
Right.
This is the killer of all of all potential,
Right.
right? So how does a person know when they're at a job that's not healthy in terms of too much comfort that's pretty much keeping them stuck?
Yeah, well, I think it's that issue of you need to be very honest with yourself, and you need to say, well, why am I staying in this company? Am I staying in this? I know this is probably a dead end job. I could probably have a better job somewhere else, or you know, but it's comfortable. I've been here a long time. I know the people, and again, I think it's all about that sort of self courage of saying, I've got to take a risk. If I'm going to get ahead, I've got to put myself out there, you know, and and so I think, really reflect and say, is this job really what I want? Am I growing in the job, or am I just we call it satisficing, right? I'm just I'm okay, but I'm
Yeah.
not particularly happy. So I think, and again, it takes the courage to look for other opportunities. Now, the other thing too is I don't advocate, quitting your job and not having another alternative. So you
Yeah.
need to generate the alternatives and, and then do that. And, sometimes you make a mistake. Sometimes, I knew a guy one time, I worked summers back when I was young,
Yeah.
in this company. And the guy left, and he always had the idea that, the grass is greener at the other. And so he took
Yeah.
a job somewhere else. The next summer I came back, he had come back. He had left, and then he'd come back, and he said,
Really.
things weren't so bad here. But, my argument for him was you could have found that out without leaving your, current employer. You could
Yeah.
have, networked with people in that organization and found out, well, the grass wasn't greener at the other company. And you probably want, but the other thing too, what I would have done in his shoes is I would have talked to my boss and say, look, I'm looking at this opportunity over there. What can you do for me to, either in terms of my own development, in terms of promotion, in terms of raises, incentives, so that I can do a little bit more for this organization. I mean, no boss is going to complain if you come to them and say, how can I help you do more in this organization? How can we have better outcomes? Because it's going to be a win-win situation. If I help the organization and move it ahead,
Hmm.
then I'm worth more. And so it should lead to, to a raise.
Yeah. What would you say to people who say that, hey, there's no real point in trying to challenge myself because I'm already happy here. And most of the time when they say that, they're not really telling the truth, right? They just don't really want to put themselves out there to be challenged.
Yeah. And
So
that's, yeah. And that's what I was saying. You got to be
yeah,
honest with yourself.
yeah,
And if you are
yeah.
happy, then, that's fine. I've got,
Hmm.
got a daughter right now who is, sort of unhappy. She is looking at another opportunity, and she's developing herself and getting training so that she can take on this other opportunity. And it's painful to watch her because she's suffering because she's not happy where she is, and she has this other opportunity, but it's a long path to get there. And so we're trying to keep her motivated and say, you need to just keep working at it. Someday it will happen, but
Hmm.
you don't give up, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned that your daughter is not too happy with, the job that she's working right now. And that is like not uncommon. It's actually a really common thing. And to be honest, it's kind of the status quo. It's
Yeah,
not really common that you find someone who actually enjoys what they're doing, right?
right.
So, it's really odd because like we have our school systems and people graduate and they still end up in a place where they're just not happy.
Yeah,
So, what would you say, because you're a college professor, right?
right.
So, what are certain strategies that people can use to find a job that they actually like and a job that fits with their personality and just who they are?
Well, I mean, part of that is sort of trial and error. You have to
Mm,
try, you
yeah.
have to try certain things and then find out that it's not a good fit, particularly if you're
Yeah.
young and you're early in your career. I think that if you're well networked and you're more senior in your career, you can get a pretty good sense of what a job is like. Another person, by having someone that you trust who's telling you, hey, this is the way it is over at our company. Here's the kind of things we do. So you can get that kind of information. But it really does involve this issue. I think we get we fear change, where we fear that if we go out there, we're going to make a mistake, and it's okay to make a mistake because we learn from the mistakes. you know but I tell our students, they're going to come out with a degree. I said, you're not going to be down on Skid Row. You're not going to be out of work because you're skilled, you're educated, and you're talented, and you're going to find something. And then they don't walk the streets. They
Hmm.
do find something because they're talented. And if you have skills and talents, and you get out there and take those chances and connect with people, you're going to find that job. I had another
Hmm.
daughter who was in the higher education. She sort of followed in her father's
Yeah.
footsteps, and she was unhappy every time. And I said, you know what? You need to really do a self-assessment. This is probably the wrong sector for you.
Hmm.
And now she's in tech.
Oh wow,
Completely, a
complete switch.
much
Yeah.
and it's a much better fit for her. She just wasn't suited for this, and that was the problem. She was thinking, "Well, I'm gonna go with what I know, which is my father's field, and, I feel comfortable and all that." But she was comfortable, but she was unhappy because she wasn't given the opportunity to grow and develop, and she wasn't challenged, really.
Hmm.
And so she changed sectors. So sometimes it involves, a major change like that, going from one sector to another.
Yeah. Yeah, so it seems like, the main thing here is just to try different things and be okay with failing. And the more you do that, the more you'll learn about who you are, like what you're good at and so on and so forth. And then you slowly narrow it down. And then the younger you start this, the much better it is because you have that time and you're not, in a place where, let's just say, it's not that easy to constantly move around just because I guess of age,
Yeah.
right? Hmm.
Yeah. And you brought up, I'm a psychologist, right? So,
Yeah.
so one of the things that's very clear, we already talked about, positive reinforcement rather than punishment. Punishment does not motivate people. We know that. Okay.
Hmm.
Um, so the other thing you brought up is this failing, right? And what do you learn from that? Well, think about this. When you succeed, you just you, your tendency is to not reflect on it. I was successful. I expected that. When you fail, you do an analysis. You say, what happened? Why did I fail? So we do learn more from our failures than our successes, because
Mm,
with our failures, it gives us the opportunity to grow. What went wrong? How can I avoid that in the future? Or how can I learn how to succeed? Right. But when we're successful, we just take it for granted and we just go. So we don't learn much from our successes, but we learn a lot from our failures.
yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Now, I'm just gonna quickly go through a few challenges that people have, when it comes down to these things, right?
Okay.
And one of the main things is that they lack belief in themselves, right? Because first of all, to even go out there and fail multiple times, you have to have a strong sense of self. Like you
Yes.
need to believe in yourself. You have to be okay with things not going right. But like with many people, if they fail once or twice, they're like they're done. Like they don't believe that they're capable of moving up and just improving, right?
Right.
So what are ways that people can build their self-belief to a point where they have that healthy sense of self, which allows them to constantly move forward even when failing?
Yeah. Well, that's why it's really important to have a good support system, what we call a social support system, right?
Hmm.
So you want to develop, in your career, people who you admire because because of their skills and talents and qualities, um, and ideally people who have different levels of experience, and have those people as a support system that you can turn to, who can be honest with you, you know and tell you, look, you've got your eyes set on a job that is maybe too much of a stretch for you, and they're willing to be honest with you
Mhm.
about that. Um, one of the things that's happening with executives all around the world is they're hiring coaches, right? So executive coaches, and the coach's role is, and I'm not, I mean, no, I know many people in jobs cannot afford to hire a professional coach, but what are these coaches doing for these executives? Well, they're sort of holding a mirror up to them, and they're saying, well, from what I understand, the coach is telling you, you may be shooting too high. So they're honest with you because they're objective. And I think you want to seek out people like that that can coach you, that can mentor you, that can help you and help you get a better assessment. It's really hard to kind of know exactly our own skills, our own limitations, and all that without having other people kind of reflect it back. Think of them as holding that mirror up to you so you can
Mhm.
see the way you really are. So I
Yeah.
think that's one of the things. I think the other thing too is to just build confidence, is to, be kind to yourself and think about the accomplishments that you've achieved, what you've been able to do. Um, and have some faith in that, but you're right. I mean, if you fail a lot of times, it can ruin your self-confidence and
Yeah.
all that, but you sort of have to keep going. Then the other thing is go out and learn something, learn a new skill, learn a new technique, and that may help you overcome the next problem.
Got it. Yeah. So it seems like it really comes down to healthy support system. Really celebrate your small wins and learn, because like the more you learn, the more hey, I have skills that I can use, to grow.
Yeah,
Right
right.
now, one thing you mentioned about the support system is that oftentimes they have to be honest, right? And then like they have to tell you, what your personal like limits are and what you can do, right?
Yeah.
But like how do you know if they're right?
Well, you have to encourage that in the other person too. You have to be able to say, "Look, I want you to tell me, when I'm making a mistake, when I'm potentially making a mistake, or I want you to make me aware of my limitations." You
Hmm.
know, and not so you don't want someone you're not going to have. It's not a good coach if the person just always agrees with you or always strokes your ego and says, "Oh no, you're great." Regardless, it's all about honesty, and so that's what's critically important. So I mean, it's okay to have support of others who, unconditional love, your family members and all that. We love you
Yeah.
regardless.
Yeah.
But that's not what you're looking for in this sort of coach. You're looking for somebody who's going to give you honest feedback.
Yeah. So what would you so what kind of people make up a healthy support system? Because like you can't like listen to everyone, right? Because
Yeah.
not everyone's going to give you the right advice. So how do you find the right support system for you?
Yeah, well, I think you have to think about why you're choosing this person to be a supportive person. That you admire them, they've accomplished a lot. There's someone who has that ability to be honest with you, to be direct with you, but to be supportive too. You don't want someone who's always criticizing you, right? Because that's
Yeah.
just to drive down your self-esteem. Um, so I think you have to choose wisely, and I don't think you
Yeah.
should just rely on one person. I mean, I think you could have different people who have different perspectives on things. Look, one of the things we advocate in sort of a full performance review of an employee is get multiple perspectives. Don't just have your supervisor evaluate you. Get a peer evaluation. If you're supervising people, get a subordinate evaluation. Have your team members evaluate your performance. If you're the head of a team, by getting all of those different perspectives on your performance, your superior, your subordinates, your peers, they're all telling you maybe something a little bit different, but it's all good information, feedback for how you're performing. And so we talk about 360 evaluations,
Yeah.
right? That's what we're really talking about.
Got it. Okay. Now, how does a person know if they're being confident or being arrogant? Like, what's the difference between the two?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's why you turn to your coaches
Uh-huh.
because they're the
Uh-huh.
ones who are gonna, distinguish that. And we know, one of the big failures of leaders is arrogance, is
Uh-huh.
thinking they're better than they really are, you know?
Mhm.
And it's really interesting because, the new thing, and I've been reading a lot, just in the, you know, social media and the news media about the role of what they call leader humility. And I think that's a bad term because leaders usually have a lot of confidence, particularly high level leaders, and you don't think of them as particularly humble.
Mhm.
But it's not really that kind of humility. It's the humility of saying, I don't know everything, and I can learn from others. I can learn from people who are also powerful leaders, but I can learn also from people that I lead. People at the lowest level might be able to teach me something. And it's being open. That humility is being open to other people's perspectives. And what humility does is it keeps you from becoming arrogant, thinking you know it all. And so a little dash of humility is a good thing. And
Mhm.
probably that's what it takes for you to go to somebody and say, "Hey, give me an honest evaluation. What are my strengths, but what are my limitations? What are the things that my weaknesses that I need to work on to become better at my job?"
Got it. Okay, so I guess it just really comes down to having that willingness to learn, knowing that you're not, some god that can never lose, right?
Right.
And then be willing to ask for help because you know that you are human and you can make mistakes. So
Right.
like that's I guess that's the real separation here.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, think about this. I mean,
Mhm.
if you're a sports fan,
I
you
am.
think about the really great professional athletes. And the really great ones are constantly working, and they work on, on practicing the skills they already have, but they learn to overcome their weaknesses, right? And
Mhm.
so if you follow these great athletes, the real superstar athletes, they're able to over time, they may have some weaknesses early in their careers, but they work on those. The basketball player who can't shoot the three-point shot, right? Works on that, you know
Yeah.
and those are the exceptional ones. The ones who think I've got all the natural talent, I don't need to, they don't become the
No.
greatest.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Now, yeah, that's great. One of the things that also people struggle with in this regard, because even if they work hard and even if they do have belief and they're not arrogant, sometimes they believe that they're not worthy of having such success. Because maybe where they come from, they've never seen that in their own lives, right? So they're not necessarily used to it. So how can people know that they are worthy of having such success?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's a very fundamental issue, right? With people that we have to value ourselves.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of an existential question you're asking,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Every person is a person of worth. Every person can develop. So our leadership program here with students, there's actually one of the things we learned early on is if you look at leadership programs, this could be in industries, could be in schools, could be in communities. Leadership programs, there's sort of two approaches. One is we're going to look for those people who have high potential for leadership. And a lot of organizations do this. They identify the high potential people and they target them for promotion, okay? And that's one approach. We don't do that approach here. What we say is leadership and leadership skills are something that everybody can develop. And so we don't pick only the ones with high potential. We think everybody can improve. And so even the people who maybe have lowest leadership potential, we work with them to develop their leadership skills. And leadership skills, we're using that very broadly. We're
Yeah.
talking about, ability to take on responsibility, to learn and grow, to be motivated, all those kinds of elements. And I think that that's the approach you need to take is everybody could be with the right training, development, attitude, skill set, everybody could be successful.
Okay. Hmm.
So I just kind of reject that idea that only certain people are going to be able to get ahead. And the other thing too is, what does it mean to be successful for you? We actually did some research on this, and we found that, you know, the measures we use of success in society are not the measures that many people use to determine their own success. So, for example, how do we measure success in society? We say, what's your income? What's your, job status? What, mobility? All these kinds of things. But there's other ways of looking at success. Are you good at your job? Whether they recognize it or not, do you feel good about yourself? There's success in the family. Have you been successful at raising great kids? Do you have a successful relationships with people? So there's a lot of ways to look at success. And, but we tend to focus on income, promotion,
Yeah,
all those kinds of things. So I
got
think,
it.
you got to be kind to yourself and say, you know, I I'm at this level, but years ago, I don't know if you know John Wooden, who is a very famous
So
basketball coach, right?
it sounds really familiar, but like it must be from like back in the day, right?
Okay, well, back in the day, and so John Wooden, we had him here at the college, and he talked, and I got an opportunity to have dinner with him.
Oh,
And so he was the well-known college coach, national championships. And our college here, we're what we call Division Three, and Division Three is no scholarships. The students play sports, intercollegiate sports, purely for the love of the sport. And he came and he spent the day with our athletes, and he said, if I had to do it all, this is the most celebrated coach in the history of college basketball. Said, if I had my career to do all over again, I think I'd work at Division Three, two steps below where he was, because he said, would love working with students who are playing for the love of the game and not for the potential for money, because none of them are going to be pros.
really?
Yeah, and I said, I can't believe this. This guy was extremely successful, but his definition of success is, am I developing these young people as a coach? Not, are we winning national championships?
Okay. Okay,
Right.
got it.
So
Yeah.
he framed his success as, what am I doing to impact the lives of these athletes I work with? Not how many championships am I winning.
Got it. Okay, so I guess it really comes down to you being able to figure out what success means for you, and
Right.
like how you approach that concept, and just believing that all people can become great,
Yeah.
right? And it's not just for a select few people who have, like, I guess, certain genetics and so on and so forth, because that's a big problem in our society. It's like putting human beings on a pedestal,
Right.
and
Right.
once you do that, you kind of view them as some creature rather
Yeah. Yeah.
rather
Right.
than a
Right.
person. You know what I mean?
Right. That you think that it's unattainable. That's not going to motivate you to, right? If there, I can never be that. Well, maybe you can.
Yeah, yeah. So it's all mindset. It's all
Yeah.
how you look at it. Got
Yeah.
it. Okay, cool. Great. Now, one of the other main problems which many people face, especially as they get older, is that they have too many family obligations, bills, and just like too many things going on in their own lives that take them away from being able to make changes in their career and find something that they actually enjoy, right? So for those people, how do they make maneuvers with all of that going on in their lives?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so there are a lot of constraints. There's constraints for in terms of what are the opportunities. You're in a particular area. There's not a lot of industries or not a lot of variety of industries. So you have limitations in terms of where you can be working, and you have to take that into account. The As we sort of started out, the one thing is, if you have at least some opportunities, don't get stuck in a toxic environment. Don't get into a kind of a job where you're going to hate every day going to work. So try to find something else. But if you do have limited opportunities, you know, you've got to deal with that, but try to grow as much as you can within those limitations. So, I mean,
It's tough.
yeah, it's
Hmm.
like, so I have worked with our
Hmm.
student athletes. So
Yeah.
they're working to become a better athlete. But when they graduate, they're never going to probably play that sport again. I mean, we have, American football, right? I mean, or
Yeah, yeah.
same as Canadian football.
Yeah,
But I
same
mean,
thing. Yeah.
you're not, you don't have real football leagues for adults, right? With pads and yeah, right.
Yeah.
So the question is, what motivates them to continue? And so what I try to tell the athletes is figure out how the work that you're doing on the field in your sport will play out for you later in your working careers. So you're learning team skills. How will those team skills translate later on? So I would say the same thing for that worker who's sort of stuck in a job where they don't have a lot of possibility of changing. Work on developing your skill set so that when you do have the opportunity to grow, maybe your kids are gone, now you're mid-career. Can you move to another place where there's greater opportunities? Can you get out of that uh,
Mm,
rut that you're in terms, or that, I want to say rut, but that situation
yeah.
where you've got to provide food on the table, raise your kids, get them schooled and all that, but you can still develop your skill set for something later on or for something very different.
Interesting. Okay, so skill acquisition is the main thing here, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
obviously, if you have like really young kids, you have to kind of take care of them first, but then while you're taking care of them, as you acquire skills, later on, all these skills will allow you to make changes, especially as your kids start to get older and don't need you as much in terms of like you being there all the time, and you want to be ready for that moment. So I guess it's
Right.
a long term game.
It's like constant development, right?
Got it. Okay, so it's a long term game, skill acquisition and long term game. Okay, got it. Now, the other one, especially, like in my generation, it tends to be laziness, right? People have a hard time getting inspired because like everything kind of feels meaningless, especially nowadays, as that's a whole new topic, but like mental health problems are through the roof, right?
Yeah.
I think you probably know that because like you're in psychology and so
Yeah.
on and
Yeah.
so forth. So how do people overcome that barrier? Like how can they get inspired and break through that block of laziness and just finally find the motivation to go out there and do things?
Yeah, well, I think you need to find what inspires you, you know,
Yeah.
and you have to search for it, and and you have to try different things, and that's the great thing about being young, that you can, I mean, I'm at a very traditional college. I mean, all of our students, for the most part, are 18 to 21, 22 years of age.
Yeah.
They're very young people, and we're a liberal arts college, and what we try to say is don't too early pigeonhole yourself into a particular career. I can talk to 18-year-old kids who come to our college and say, I'm going to get my degree in this. I'm going to go to law school. I'm going to become, I watch LA Law. I'm going to become that guy,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
It's way too early to have your whole career path laid out. And most
Mm,
people, I tell them your career's not a straight line. You're going to be surprised how many times you're going to change in your career. And so I think it's that idea of try different things, try new things, and find something that truly inspires you.
mhm.
And if you try enough, I mean, you're going to find something. I think I would be very surprised for somebody who's, I think that then they need to really seek counseling if they have nothing that is inspirational, that's motivating in their lives. You know,
Mhm.
I mean, the sort of stereotype, don't mean to, like, stereotype younger
Yeah,
generation,
no,
but
no, it's fine, it's
but
fine.
but I'm really good at gaming.
Oh,
Well, there
yeah,
are
yeah, yeah.
opportunities with gaming, right? I
There
mean,
is,
there
yeah.
are now there's professional gamers, right? People
Yeah,
will pay to
they have,
watch
like, tournaments and stuff like that.
but
Yeah.
maybe it's gaming development, right?
Mm,
So, find that passion, you know? I mean, this, like artists, they have a passion for what they do. Well, then find that.
yeah.
In my previous institution, we worked we worked across disciplines with students. So we had art students, and we provide the opportunity for them to take business courses. And they go, well, I'm an art student. Why would I want to take business course? Well, someday you're going to sell your art, right? And so you may want to have a few business skills for understanding the business side of art, right?
Mhm.
And so what we did was we created in the art community an art store, and we allowed the artists to work a little bit in the on the business of art, right? Not just
Yeah.
in creating art, but you should know a little bit about that. And they may find out, some of them might find out that, hey, I'm really not a very good artist, but I'm a heck of a good businessman. And they may stay in the art sector, but they may become, an art dealer, a promoter, you know.
Yeah. Okay, so let's just say someone is truly lost, right? Because, like, believe it or not, many people in my generation have this problem where they kind of know what they like, but they kind of don't because there's so many options, right? So if a person is truly lost, like, where would you tell them to start? Like, what questions should they actually ask themselves, and where should they look back in their lives to find out what could possibly inspire them, so they're not trying a bunch of random things that aren't necessarily in line with who they are?
Yeah. Well, again, I would go back to try to have some mentors, some people who are in different areas, who are maybe
Mhm.
older or at least are, have maybe more established in a career or something like that, and reach out to those people. If you have the resources, there are professional career counselors that you can go to. Um, there are, look, uh, there. If you want to explore, this is why psychologists have created interest inventories. So you can find out what kind of career interests you what really motivates you. So there's actually something, the U.S. Department of Labor developed something called ONET.
Mm.
Okay. And it's onetonline.org, I believe. And ONET, in there, if you go to that website, there's a, you know, career, career search and development tools in there. So you can go and take an interest inventory, and it can tell you what kinds of career paths you're interested in, right? So I'm interested in mechanical stuff, or I'm interested
Okay.
in artistic stuff.
Mm.
And that's actually a free resource. Okay.
Oh,
So
is
you
it?
can get that. But there are,
Mm.
we have that in our career development center for our students. They can go take it. They can get career counseling, all that kind of stuff. If you have those resources, reach out to a career counselor. But there are online resources that'll help you search for a career. And that's the US government one, but I'm sure there's all
There's
kinds of,
probably something in Canada too.
yeah.
Yeah.
So look, it's not going to do you any good sitting in your bedroom, trying to find out what your career is. You got to go
Yeah.
out and and
Try.
and test it, right? Try
Yeah.
it and talk to people. You know,
Hmm. Yeah. So I guess it just comes down to mentors seeking guidance from people that are older and using resources online,
yeah, yeah.
right?
Because the problem is that young people don't know what the variety of careers are.
Yeah.
Almost every school, probably they have the day where the parents come to work and they talk about or they come to school and they talk about their jobs, right?
Yeah.
And the idea is to get kids interested in that.
Hmm. Now, what would you say to someone who might be entering their late 20s and they haven't figured it out yet, but then now they're in the mindset of, oh, money is more important? Because as people get older, their perspective changes, right? Because they start to get away from finding what they love versus focusing more on money.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, money is important, right? We all need a certain amount of income,
Yeah, yeah,
but doing there are jobs that that pay well, but they're not very rewarding. I mean, I know a lot of recent graduates will go into finance, go into banking and all that, and then I talk to them a few years later and they're very unhappy.
yeah,
Usually they change jobs, right? That's why I said, it's not a straight line. They think it's going to be a straight line,
yeah,
but then they find out, wait
yeah.
a minute, the money's great, but I'm unhappy. And so I'd rather take a lower paying job that provided, the kinds of things that I really want in my life. This job is so demanding. Yes, it's high paying, but I'm never going to have a family. I'm never going to have, time to travel. And those are important to me. and then they change their, careers. So,
Hmm.
so, you know, I look, if you are doing your job just for the money,
Hmm.
then the question I would ask myself is, can I make a good amount of money and do something that's rewarding for me? And I'll bet you could, but you just don't know about it. And so
Yeah.
that is the motivation for you to go look, right? If you're
Hmm.
making a lot of money and you're slightly unhappy or moderately unhappy, well, can you make a lot of money and be happy?
Yeah.
And that's the question I would ask myself. And then I'd go seek out those positions where you can make the money and be happy.
Yeah, got it. So I guess it really comes down to viewing it as a long-term thing,
Yeah,
right? Rather than just saying, "Oh, it's time to focus on money," but like people sometimes forget to understand that they have like in general, you have another like 60, 70 years ahead of you.
that's
And
right.
if you're just rotting in something that's not meaningful, I mean, you're going to be miserable because work is a huge part of life, right? It's a huge part of life.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
and think about this too. We were on the athletes, but that came
Yeah.
to mind when you were talking about this. Is most athletes their careers are over, in really young to mid adulthood. So
Yeah.
these professional athletes, they can't play after 35, 40 at
That's right.
maximum, and
Hmm.
then they have a whole career. And so what you want to look at is, well, what do those people do? And some of them are unhappy. They're only thinking about the past and not about the future. But a
Yeah.
lot of them go on to really great things. We had a whole conference here of people who'd worked in professional sports who went into other leadership positions. Some of them were venture capitalists. Some
Yeah.
of them went into education, and they were all, successful in another sector. Heck,
Yeah.
one of the guys was that we had at that conference. This was years ago. Jack Kemp ran for
Hmm.
vice president of the United States. He didn't win, but he
Okay.
was a professional football player who became a
Yeah.
politician, successful politician.
Yeah.
He was a congressman.
Yeah, Kobe Bryant is a really good example of that too. I mean, the most seamless transition coming from an extreme obsession towards basketball, seamless transition into
I wrote a
storytelling and so
blog
on.
post about Kobe when he
Did you?
retired. When he retired,
Oh,
yeah,
no way.
because I thought he did retirement exactly the way you want to do retirement.
Perfectly, yeah.
Fortunately, he had this tremendous future ahead of him,
Yeah.
and then died in a helicopter crash.
Yeah.
But he knew how to retire. He knew why he was, he was a, So for anybody who wants an example, the older people who are thinking about retirement, and
Yeah.
that's important too to think about,
Seamless transitions and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
because it's hard for some people. Some people
Yeah.
retire and they're miserable, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. Well, Dr. Riggio, unfortunately, our hour has come to an end here. This was a really great conversation. Thank you so much for all this information, and I'll definitely look more into your work, and maybe I'll send you an email in 6 months so we can do it again.
Yeah, yeah. So check out
Definitely,
my Psychology Today blog because
absolutely,
said we've talked
absolutely,
about a lot of these things.
great. Now, if people wanted to go and look into your work, where would you tell them to go?
Yeah, so go to psychologytoday.com, all one word. And my blog is called Cutting Edge Leadership. And
Yeah,
I write about a lot about leadership, but employment, but I also write about other things, right? So I have some things on relationships. So my original research was in relationships and the role that emotions and nonverbal communication, body language play in developing good relationships. So you can
yeah,
read that stuff. I also have some books. If you want to develop as a leader, I created a book actually for my students as my COVID project. It's called Daily Leadership Development, and it's
got it.
365 steps. What can you do each day to make yourself a better leader?
Hmm.
And when I talk about leader, you could just say person to make
Yeah,
yourself a better person. So it's all evidence based, based on research and psychology and other disciplines, and it tells you what's a little thing you can do 10 minutes a day to make yourself into a better leader and a better person.
is that right?
Daily leadership
Hmm.
development. Get it at Barnes and Noble.
Yeah, I will put all those links in the video description below, and people can go and check it out if
Okay.
need be.
Okay.
All right, Dr.
Great talking
Riggio,
with you, Shaq.
thank you so much. Yeah, it was great. It was great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
All right. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Take care.